About all the recent memo madness. The president agreed to release the Republican memo that criticized the Russia investigation. Now, will he do the same for the Democrats and let them have their side of the story? Plus, President Trump's lawyers debating whether he should meet with Robert Mueller. The question, is there any evidence that the president did anything wrong? And if not, why sit down with a special counsel? And what another weird day at the markets. Did you see this? Look up there. Look up now. Because it's up now. After whatever that was yesterday and whatever that was this morning, it's a new whatever and it's better. Let's get to it.
Breaking news. Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
And a live look at the White House, where we expect the press secretary, Sarah Sanders, to take to the podium in just about 14 minutes. We're waiting to hear whether President Trump will allow the release of the Democrats' memo on the Russia investigation. The White House says it will go through the same review process that the GOP document went through last week. The House Intelligence Committee voted unanimously last night to let the Democrats release their memo. President Trump has 5 days to block its release. The House Intelligence Committee's top Democrat, Adam Schiff of California, says he's worried that President Trump could black out large sections of the thing.
We also want to make sure that any redactions that are made are fully explained to our committee by the FBI or Department of Justice, and likewise by the White House. We want to make sure that the White House does not redact our memo for political purposes, and obviously that's a deep concern.
Well, these memos have become not only a distraction, but an embarrassing back and forth for both parties in Washington. To wit, one source tells our John Roberts that the Democrats purposefully filled their memo with information about sources and methods in order to force the president to block the release or make major edits. But Justice Department officials tell Fox News that they reviewed the document before last night's vote and didn't make any edits or redactions. So who really knows? Staffers for House Intelligence Committee Chairman, the Republican Devin Nunes of California, wrote the GOP document. He's a supporter of President Trump and served on his transition team. And then he had that late night thing there at the White House. The Republican memo accuses the feds of abusing their powers to spy on the former Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page. Democrats say their memo disputes some of those claims. They say Republicans distorted information in hopes that Americans will be less likely to trust the Justice Department's investigation. The special counsel, Robert Mueller, is looking into Moscow's meddling in the 2016 presidential election, possible collusion with members of Trump's campaign, and whether the president obstructed justice. It's our understanding he doesn't watch cable news or read memos. President Trump has denied all the claims. The chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, is live on the North Lawn. Hello, John.
Shep, good afternoon to you. We just came out of the cabinet room a short time ago. Chief of Staff John Kelly was there, said the president has the new Democratic memo. He has not had an opportunity to read it just yet. Kelly handed in the memo just before he went into that lengthy meeting in the cabinet room on MS-13. But the White House says that the Democratic memo will go through the same process that the Republican memo did last week here at the White House. The White House counsel's office will review it. Members of the National Security Council will review it. They'll bring in people from the Directorate of National Intelligence and the FBI and the DOJ as well to get opinions on whether or not this thing should be released. I am told by sources who have seen this memo already that it goes much more to sources and methods than the Republican memo did. There are some people who think that that was intentional, that Adam Schiff is looking for the White House to make some redactions, make some changes. Schiff, as you pointed out earlier, is warning against, quote, political redactions. I'm told by sources here at the White House that there is material in that memo that will likely need redacting. At the end of the day, though, Schiff, the White House wants to get this one out. It wants to show that it can be fair, whether it's the Republican memo or the Democratic memo. But it's likely that the Democrats may be able to claim a moral victory when or at least a political moral victory, when their memo is eventually released, because it's likely that there will be some substantial changes made to that memo before it's given out to the public for consumption. Shep?
What, one side listens to their own side and the other side listens to their own side. This is all just a bunch of nothing, isn't it, John?
Well,
yeah.
I can't say that for sure, Shep. We report, you decide.
Well, yeah, okay, we'll do that. Hey, the chief of staff, John Kelly, said in an interview that the president will not extend the deadline for the Dreamers, right?
He did say that, which runs counter to some things that the president said, which we will get to in just a second. But first of all, a headline coming out of that MS-13 meeting, the president was asked at the end by my colleague Steve Holland from Reuters whether he would shut down the government, because the president mentioned that earlier, that if he couldn't get the immigration reforms he was looking for, he would go for a government shutdown. Of course, the government's scheduled to run out of money Thursday at midnight. Listen to what the president said.
These incredible professionals at the table cannot do their job unless we change really the legislation, and we're going to get it done. Frankly, I'll go a step further. If we don't change the legislation, if we don't get rid of these loopholes where killers are allowed to come into our country and continue to kill gang members, and we're just talking about MS-13, there are many gang members that we don't even mention. If we don't change it, let's have a shutdown. We'll do a shutdown.
All right, so that wasn't the question. That was what the president said that prompted the question from Steve Holland of Reuters. It's a quick turnaround here. We can't get everything we want all the time. But here's the interesting thing about that, Shep, is I'm not sure what the president is talking about, because the government runs out of money Thursday at midnight. There are talks underway on Capitol Hill for another continuing resolution, and nobody's talking about attaching DACA or immigration reform to the continuing resolution. I mean, that may come in a budget cap fight later, but in terms of a government shutdown right now, nobody's even talking about that. Now, to the issue of extending the deadline, John Kelly up on Capitol Hill today told reporters that the president likely is not inclined to extend the March 5th deadline, where the protection for the so-called dreamers runs out. But listen to what he said in Davos, Switzerland, in a CNBC interview just a couple of weeks ago.
We want to do what's right, and we're going to do what's right, and we're going to solve the DACA problem. And if we need a little more time, we'll take a little more time. I want to get the problem solved correctly.
If we need a little more time, we'll take a little more time. The president said something similar in an off-camera gaggle just before that. He said, yeah, I might do that. I might do that in terms of extending the deadline. I'm not guaranteeing it because I want to put a little bit of, sound like he was going to say pressure on the other side, but I certainly have the right to do that if I want. So the president, at least twice on the record, is saying might extend the deadline, but the chief of staff, John Kelly, saying that he's not inclined to do it. So we'll see where that goes. We've got just a little under a month now. And back to where we're talking about the shutdown, Chuck Schumer was up on Capitol Hill speaking to cameras just as the president said what he said about a potential shutdown. Schumer saying, quote, speaks for itself. We had one Trump shutdown. No one wants another. But again, Shep, nobody's talking about a shutdown, and nobody's talking about attaching DACA to this CR. So I'm a little puzzled as to what that was all about.
The president is, so there's that. John Roberts, thank you. Look at this, look at this, look it up at the TV, look at this. The Dow is up 500 points. How, why, I don't have any idea. But I do know that this morning, got up at like 5:30 because the overnight markets, and you knew, and everything was crazy, and Hang Seng and FTSE and everything. Wow, look. Got up at 5:30. Sure enough, the whole world was collapsing around us, and they were like, we don't know what's going to open. The Fox Business people, we're going to be down 600, 700 if they open. We don't know. And then it opened. It was way down off hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of points. You know what you can count on right now? You can count on volatility. That's one thing. You can count on this. If yours is a short-term strategy, that's no good. You need a long-term strategy. And here's a thing, just by way of observation, not critique. The regular guys, regular folks have been on the sidelines with this market. This whole run-up for the last couple of years or even few years has largely been institutions, right? Not everyday folks. They haven't been in the market. You know when they got in? According to the people on Wall Street, they got in January. This January, so like a month ago. And they rode it up and rode it up and rode it up. And yesterday, and last week, well, it's going up. Markets go down, markets go up. At the moment, they're going up. We made a big deal out of them going down yesterday because it went down the most of any day in the history of history. Today, it's up 484 points. We'll keep an eye. In the meantime, let's bring in Elena Treen. She's a reporter for the website Axios. Back to government shutdowns. I've been listening kind of closely because it's part of the job, you know. And the Democrats are saying, government shutdown, if you believed it was the Schumer shutdown, that didn't work out very well. And then the Republicans are like, no shutdown. If you believe it was the Trump shutdown, that didn't work out very well. There's only one person talking about a shutdown, and that's the president. Why is that? Do you know?
That's exactly what it is. It's pretty puzzling. As you're saying, I mean, no one was really expecting talk of shutdown to happen. I mean, Thursday's the deadline for the new spending bill. Last time the government shut down, Schumer and McConnell agreed that if it wasn't attached to this February 8th deadline, then they would move on to it later in the month, and that's what everyone's expecting this time. So for Trump to say that, it's an issue that he thinks it's worth shutting the government down over, most people were definitely surprised by those comments.
Been to New Orleans?
Yes.
Yeah. At Pato's, they have dueling pianos. There's one on either side there, and everybody has a great time and yells and talks about hating LSU and loving Ole Miss. You've been there for that. Well, we have dueling memos. And the people who liked that memo from last week, they liked that memo and they're listening to that. And then there's another memo. What is happening now with this memo? Because it depends on who you ask. What's up with this Democratic-style memo?
Right. Well, the Democrats argue that this is their rebuttal to the Republican memo from last week. They think that...
They don't think Republicans are going to listen to them, do they? Because Republicans listened last week.
Well, that's what they might be saying. But, I mean, as you heard, the White House has said, Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah said yesterday that they will handle this Democratic memo the same way that they handled the Nunes memo. If that is the case, then we'll see.
Wait. The president said on the night of the State of the Union, 100% we're going to release the memo, and at that moment he hadn't read it, right? Or that's
he hadn't, and he did reportedly say that, yes, he would release it without reading it. That's not exactly the case this time. This time, he has 5 days since the House Intelligence Committee voted yesterday to release the memo. So Trump has 5 days to approve it, and during that time, he has to read it, go through it. There's some national security and White House counsel that need to review it as well, and then he'll make that decision. The key question here is whether more so not really whether he'll release it, which is a question, but I think the bigger question is whether how much there will redact it, how many redactions there will be in
And
this.
if they make redactions, Democrats will say you made redactions to change the point, and Republicans will say no, national security, and we'll move forward, and everybody will yell at each other. But let's cut through it all and go back to the original memo. The original memo. For those who wrote it, what was its real purpose?
Well, that purpose was to show that what they believed were massive abuses by the FBI and the Department of Justice. Well,
you can tell the truth.
Well, that's what they're saying. What others are saying, I mean, from what we're hearing as well, is, a lot of people think that this might be a way to discredit the FBI and the Department of Justice in this investigation, in the Russia investigation that Robert Mueller is conducting. Trump said himself on Saturday that the memo completely vindicates him. But as I said, Nunes, Republicans, they're going to argue that this is exposing a lot of mismanagement within the FBI as well as within the Department of Justice.
Elena?
I'm here.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Good to see you, Shep.
Have a wonderful turnaround Tuesday. Have you been watching this?
I have been.
The markets today. Oh, my goodness. We've had a 1,000-point turnaround today. I know, because this morning at like 9:30, that's when the markets open here in Tiny Town. You see that far left side of the thing there, that stalactite there. It's just terrible. Today we got a stalagmite down there on the right hand. Yep. Up almost 500 points, or it was a second ago. If you hang on a minute, it'll change because there's volatility in the market. The VIX is up there and there's volatility. I know it hasn't been this way for a long time. The market's been very calm. Well, now they're volatile. It's a market. So it goes. And that's happening. They're bringing in more cables for the briefing, obviously. Sarah Sanders is scheduled to be up there presently. So we're going to take a commercial break so we don't miss it. And if she comes out during the commercial, we'll interrupt the commercial. Well, an Amtrak spokesperson is talking again, saying everybody's okay after one of its trains broke in half this morning while traveling from Washington through New York and up to Boston. Come look over here. Oh, that's not where I walk over there? Okay. Well, it happened in Havre de Grace. See that? Havre de Grace is the name of the town in Maryland, about 30 miles north and east of Baltimore. In a statement, Amtrak claimed there was a mechanical issue, and indeed there was. When a train breaks in half, it's a mechanical issue. They were separated. What if somebody had been walking between those cars? About 50 people were on board at the time. They all transferred to another train. Just this weekend, 2 Amtrak workers died when their train collided with a freight train. No, that's okay. More than 100 others hurt. Investigators say they're looking into both of these incidents and others. Stocks all over the map today, one day after the Dow had its biggest ever point drop, not percentage drop, but point drop. And this is the point where I walk over here. You can see what's happening here with the points today. We were up 500 just a minute ago. Now we're up 400, and between then and now we've been up 350. But here's the thing that matters, the percentage. And flip this thing around, and I want to kind of show, wasn't that neat? Kind of show what happened at the beginning of the day. During this period, before the markets opened, they were screaming that everything was messed up in Europe and Asia, and all the markets were just down. And they predicted we'd open down, which we did, but they didn't know what would happen next, except they figured volatility. And sure enough, there's been, for current times, there has been an enormous amount of volatility. You can see how often it's gone from green to red and green to red and red to green throughout the day. The beginning of the session plunged about 550 points, just as they predicted on Fox Business this morning. But within a half an hour or so, it recovered a few hundred points. So it's just been all over the place. And that volatility is where the traders make money. So for them, this is great. It's a little, after a couple of years of, it's a little weirding. A little weird. Like I see you're dressed in black for the occasion.
Yeah, I'm dressed in black because I'm outside most of the day and it's cold out there. But let me tell you, the beginning of this day that you were very intelligently pointing out, we started at about 570 points down, turned to 300 points on the upside. Do you know how long that took? 25 minutes.
I was watching.
25 minutes.
Yeah. Okay,
this is so bizarre. And even for somebody like me who loves to watch the markets, that's just strange and unnerving.
It is.
But look, so now we're up. You know, we were up earlier 500, now we're up 364. The bots have taken over. I just want to tell you, inside the day, we've had something like a 960-point swing, 1,000-point swing. What's in part going on here that people aren't used to, we are at such high levels that any decent-sized move looks massive. Because, you know, here we are, we're still at 24,000 and change. Those moves look really, really big compared to what we're used to.
Read a lot of stuff today, and it seems like one of the things that almost all the smart people agree on is money's not going to be cheap like it used to be, and people woke up and realized it.
Well, you know, and I've been talking to people this afternoon. What are you worried about? You're in the market, talking to traders, experts, pros, and they're telling me inflation is one of the big things. We have a new Fed chief. We thought we knew what he was going to be about, right? But maybe not. Maybe we've got it wrong. We don't, you know, what would he, will he get on the job and decide, hey, we've got to knock this inflation thing down and start raising rates immediately?
But what we just saw was that wages were up, and that's what everybody's been wanting for so long and so often. Wall Street hates good news.
It's a good thing.
Because it means other things. It means a lot of other things.
Well, they worry about inflation, rising prices, and that could whack the stock market. But listen, I want to tell you, I went out and talked to some folks, real human beings out in the street. We do that occasionally and not to experts, you know, to see what they thought about this, thinking that they would be like some of the screaming hysterics on TV, like, oh, my goodness, this is terrible. That is not what we heard. Listen to this.
Great.
Obviously, these are big declines, but we've also had big increases. So typically when you have very fast, big declines, it's usually not a sign of, oh, the market's going to be bad for a long time. It's usually just a short-term correction.
It hasn't happened in a long time, so it's pretty early to say exactly what it means. And I think we just sort of have to wait around and sort of see when the market stabilizes.
It was coming. We all knew it was coming. It's just starting to happen now. I think the market will rebound.
How smart are these people?
We'll find out.
Well, no, I think they're super informed. I mean, I was just really impressed at the state of the play on the street. They seem to be way ahead of us. And, I thought that was really cool.
Remain calm and carry on.
Remain calm and carry on, and maybe you'll find something you can buy if the market ever goes down again.
Two big things coming up presently. Sarah Sanders is going to come out and talk to the press. That's what the White House says. We believe them. In addition, on Sanders Watch, still waiting. Sarah Sanders set to come out at any moment. Today's White House briefing brought to you by Fox News Channel. And we'll see it once it starts. We'll take you there live. First, let's get a little bit more on the markets and another wild ride day on Wall Street. Let's bring in financial analyst Heather Herzog. How are you?
I'm great. Now I'm better.
Well, yeah, you know, volatility, the VIX changed, you know, suddenly wages went up and everybody freaked out, I guess.
Right. It's a chain reaction. So when you see wages go up, you set off this reaction that people think inflation is then going to go up because people are spending more. If inflation goes up, those interest rates goes up, and you know, that will spell bad things for the economy. The bottom line is inflation in doses, they're kind of like carbs. In doses, it's fine, but too much inflation, too many carbs, not a good thing.
Yesterday, about 3 o'clock, though, something weird happened that looked like program trading in computers. Do we know yet?
I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think that, these big swings aren't necessarily having to do with, the programming trades, as you said. I think this is just, I think it honestly is, people are freaking out. I think they pulled out of the market.
Speaking of, look what happened. Sarah Sanders has made it. We don't want to miss anything. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Sarah, to you.
Finish and answer questions on the news of the day. Thanks, guys. John.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is John Cronin. I am the Acting Assistant Attorney General of the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice. Before serving in my current role, I supervised the Terrorism and International Narcotics Unit of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Prior to that, I served as an Assistant United States Attorney in the Southern District of New York, where I prosecute violent criminals and I prosecuted national security defendants, including Osama bin Laden's son-in-law and the attempted Times Square bomber. On the day that Attorney General Jeff Sessions was sworn in, President Trump sent him executive orders to reduce crime in America and to target transnational organized crime. As Acting Assistant Attorney General, I support the Attorney General in accomplishing these goals by directing the enforcement of all federal criminal laws, with the exception of those that are specifically designated to other divisions of the Department of Justice. As Sarah mentioned, my duties include oversight of the nearly 700 prosecutors in the criminal division, and that includes the organized crime and gang section, the capital case section, the International Criminal Investigative Training Assistance Program, and the Office of Overseas Prosecutorial Development, Assistance, and Training. I had the opportunity just now to brief President Trump about one of the most significant threats to the public safety of our communities, MS-13. And I appreciate the opportunity to also speak with you today about that threat. MS-13, or Mara Salvatrucha, has grown to more than 30,000 members worldwide, 10,000 of whom live right here in the United States, spanning 40 states and the District of Columbia. This violent, murderous gang has infiltrated our country. It is estimated that there are 2,000 members in Los Angeles, between 800 and 1,200 members in Dallas and Houston, 2,000 members on Long Island, between 800 and 1,200 members in Boston, and approximately 3,000 members living right here in Washington, D.C., and the D.C. metropolitan area. And I'm sure many of you, not all of you know, MS-13 is probably the most violent and ruthless gang terrorizing our streets today. Their motto is Mata, Viola, Controla, which means kill, rape, control. It is this motto and indiscriminate violence that MS-13 lives and rules by. They commit rape, robbery, extortion, and murder, often just for the sake of it. They attack their victims with chains, bats, machetes, firearms. MS-13 recruits children to be murderers. They gang rape young girls and sell them for sex. I briefed the president on a few examples of MS-13's brutality. These include a 15-year-old Gaithersburg, Maryland girl named Damaris Reyes Rivas, who was stabbed 13 times with knives and a wooden stake. The girl's killers filmed her murder so they could show gang leaders back in El Salvador what they had done. Damaris's body was savagely dumped next to railroad tracks under the same road, the Beltway, that many of us take to work every day. I briefed the president about the MS-13 members who murdered a fellow gang member they believed to be a snitch and who murdered a recruit for violating gang rules. One of those individuals had his head severed. MS-13 buried those two victims in shallow graves in a park in Falls Church, Virginia, a park just about 10 miles from here. I briefed the president about a Long Island victim who was lured into the woods of central Islip, New York by MS-13 members, where he was beaten with sticks and a fire extinguisher. The gang members ultimately cut his throat with a pocket knife and sadistically stuffed his body into a drainage pipe where it went undiscovered for months. The Department of Justice, under the leadership of Attorney General Sessions, is devoting resources to accomplishing the President's directive of reducing violent crime and ensuring that our citizens are no longer held hostage by murderous savages like MS-13 members. Attorney General Sessions has designated MS-13 a priority for the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. The Department of Justice will be surging hundreds of federal prosecutors, new federal prosecutors, to the field specifically to focus on violent crime and immigration offenses. The department has enhanced our relationships with the Northern Triangle countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, to target MS-13. This past summer, Attorney General Sessions visited El Salvador, where he met with the El Salvadoran Attorney General, Douglas Melendez, to discuss joint efforts to dismantle MS-13 at its roots. Soon after that meeting, about 70 gang members were charged in El Salvador. And in total, our work with our Central American partners had thus far resulted in the arrests or charges against more than 4,000 suspected MS-13 members. The Justice Department, in coordination with our partners on the state and local level, will continue to prosecute scores of MS-13 gang members located in the United States. But because MS-13 is based and operates in El Salvador, and because MS-13 largely directs its murderous mission from prisons out there in El Salvador, we must do more than enforce our domestic violent crime laws against gang members in the United States. Our investigations have revealed that when we fail to enforce our immigration and human smuggling laws, when we fail to enforce immigration laws and allow for loopholes to exist to let future MS-13 gang members into the country, MS-13 can very easily simply replenish its jailed membership by sending more gang members across our borders. And for that reason, as well, the Department of Justice also remains committed to enforcing our criminal immigration laws and to identifying and targeting MS-13's smuggling networks. Be clear, we will undertake all lawful measures to end this scourge on our communities. Thank you for your attention.
John, real quick question.
Quick question, yeah. Given the threat that you're discussing here, why has Attorney General Sessions renewed a sort of increase in enforcement against marijuana, even though a lot of states have tried to decriminalize or make it legal?
Sure. I'm not able to talk much detail into the marijuana policy, but I will say that there are a number of policies that the Department of Justice is pursuing on any given day. As the Assistant Attorney General of the Criminal Division, I've certainly seen the harm that marijuana can do. But more importantly, the priorities here are not at the expense of any resources being addressed in the marijuana policy. And with respect to MS-13, the Attorney General has made clear that he's devoting sufficient resources and additional resources to ensure that the districts, the U.S. Attorney's Office, have the prosecutors necessary to address the scourge in our communities.
But, I mean, you do have finite resources, correct? So why put a priority again in an area that had been deprioritized and had not been considered nearly the threat that this kind of violence you're talking about is?
Well, we're dealing with multiple priorities any day at the Department of Justice. It's a matter of allocating resources. There will be sufficient resources targeting MS-13, and we will continue to devote those resources to that threat. Yes.
People in this community have been reading about MS-13 since 2006. Mm-hmm. Is it your position that the previous two administrations, Bush and Obama, simply did not prioritize this, or is it much worse now than it was then, and therefore it is justified to have the focus you're describing here today?
Yeah, MS-13, you're correct, has certainly been around for some time. I do think we've seen a significant uptick in their violence in the past several years. When you're looking at the acts of atrocities they've committed, both in local communities here and really across the country, I think it's a new threat. And unlike one we've really seen from a violent transnational organized crime that is operating on United States soil. MS-13, like I said in my remarks, is not only has 10,000 members in the United States, but they are across the country in 40 states and the district. We have MS-13 prosecutions going on in Virginia, New York, LA, Texas, all around the country. And
the previous two administrations not appreciate this, let this grow, let this become a bigger problem?
Well, I can't talk to the priorities of the previous administrations. I can talk to the priorities here, and combating and targeting MS-13 is the top priority of this administration, of this Department of Justice. But in order to effectively target MS-13, it's not enough that federal and state authorities are enforcing the criminal laws with respect to MS-13 members on U.S. soil. We also have to make sure that MS-13 is not in a position to replenish its ranks by sending additional members or additional unaccompanied children into the United States who will later be recruited by MS-13 to be their murderers in a few years down the road. Unless we're able to do that, we'll be in a constant situation where MS-13 will be reconstituting its ranks with us able to effectively eradicate it from U.S. society.
Yeah. Two questions.
Yeah.
Last year, President Trump talked about MS-13. We saw some graphic detail about MS-13. Now you've given the president an update. What beyond the immigration issue will the Justice Department be doing to break the back of MS-13? That's the first question.
Sure. Well, the first question is that the Department of Justice has been and will continue to dedicate considerable resources to ensure that MS-13 is being targeted. And I think we're seeing that that's working. Last year, the Department of Justice secured more convictions against, secured convictions against 1,200 gang members. We charged the most federal firearms offenses in a decade. We brought more cases against violent criminals in at least a quarter of the century. So domestically, that is what we're doing, and we're going to continue that. I mentioned the additional prosecutors that are going to be sent out to the field. There are additional prosecutors going out to specific areas where MS-13 is a problem, and we will enforce our robust criminal statutes that allow us to target a variety of conduct: robbery, racketeering, murder, drug trafficking, to get them off our streets. Another important component, too, is capacity building. One focus, like I mentioned, is working with our partners in the Northern Triangle countries, in Central America. We provide training down there to their law enforcement and their prosecutors, and whatever systems we can to make sure they are able to target MS-13 at the roots in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, before that threat hits United States soil. So it's a multi-tiered attack that the Department of Justice is undertaking.
My second question on another issue, and I'm glad you're here today. The Eric Garner case, it's still out there, and people are waiting for an indictment. His mother is looking for justice. He cried out 11 times, "I can't breathe." What's new? What's happening? What should we expect on that case?
With respect to that case, I have no update that I'll be able to share. I think it would be better directed at others, maybe in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
But it's in the criminal. We understand it is in the criminal department, the criminal portion of of Justice. So, I mean, is there any movement at all? Because I'm hearing that there should have been an indictment. Sure.
And I apologize, but to the extent an ongoing investigation exists, I'm not able to talk beyond that at this point. I apologize. Yes, please.
John, in the cabinet room where you gave your first presentation, the whole MS-13 issue was wrapped up in the need to increase border enforcement to change our immigration laws. Did you have any idea how many of the 10,000 gang members of MS-13 in this country are here legally and how many are here illegally?
It's hard to put a statistic on that number because often they are not caught and they enter the country without us knowing. But I would give one example as kind of a snapshot of what we are seeing. This past November, the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security announced the results of Operation Raging Bull. Operation Raging Bull was our enhanced efforts to target MS-13, and it culminated in the arrest of about 267 arrests, both in the United States and in El Salvador. In the United States.
Two big things we don't want you to miss. A live look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Seconds ago, we were up 600 points. The Dow in a turnaround Tuesday. Certainly, it most likely will not recover everything from yesterday with 20 minutes left to go in the day, but you know, positive is positive and yay positive. And another thing that we've been promising all day, and we're going to take you there for it. This is a live look at Cape Canaveral in Florida. SpaceX is about to launch a brand new rocket, and it is a very big deal. This is a Falcon Heavy rocket. It is right now the most powerful rocket on the planet ×2. This is set to be the biggest and brightest and most impressive rocket launch since the space shuttles retired. And SpaceX reports it to be the future of human space travel. This rocket has 28 Merlin engines, 5 million pounds of thrust, the equivalent of strapping 18 747s together and igniting them. The fuel on board, the explosive equivalent of 4 million pounds of TNT. Now, this is about to be a demonstration flight, so there's no crew on board, only one special payload, a midnight, cherry, brand new, electric Tesla Roadster, which Elon Musk says will go deep into space for 1 billion years or so, quoting now, unless it blows up on ascent. Our Phil Keating is live at KSC to watch it all, and they're doing a NASA-like NASA channel with a play-by-play. Phil, it's a big day.
Humongous day, Shep, especially for SpaceX and beyond SpaceX, for all human space travel in the future. If this rocket does successfully launch up, heads off into space, deploys the Tesla electric sports car, sending it out to the Earth-Mars orbit, and then all 3 rocket stages come back down to Earth, 2 of them landing a few miles from here on land at the landing zone, and the center core burning for an additional minute, and that would then come down, aim to at least, on the floating drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. If SpaceX can accomplish all this, this opens the doors to, number one, putting a crew capsule on top of the Falcon Heavy, taking humans back to the moon. You could even take humans out to Mars as long as you have an orbiting fuel ship for resupplying the spacecraft with fuel. You could also send it out to an asteroid. It also opens up massive new, bigger and larger payloads for the U.S. military, for the satellite industry, as well as for NASA.
Phil, as you know, the hotels are full down there. There are long lines to get into the base this morning, all around Kennedy Space Center, where it wasn't that long ago. Everybody was afraid, oh no, the space industry is dying. Lo and behold, it is not. They've even set up a NASA TV style play-by-play for their launch with lots of cameras. So let's listen in as SpaceX gives it a go. And hopefully, when Elon Musk says it only has a 50-50 chance of success, hopefully we're on the plus side of the 50. 30 seconds away. Let's listen.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Launch director on countdown 1. SpaceX Falcon Heavy, go for launch. Falcon Heavy is configured for flight.
T-minus 15, stand by for terminal count. 10, 9, 8.
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
30 seconds. If you can hear me over the cheering, Falcon Heavy heading to space on our test flight. Building on the history of Saturn V Apollo, returning pad 39A to interplanetary mission. We're getting ready to throttle down for max Q. You've heard the call out. Vehicle is supersonic. Side boosters are now throttling back up to full power.
Maximum dynamic pressure.
We're past max Q, the period of maximum loads on the vehicle. Next up, we'll be waiting for the side boosters to begin to throttle down prior to booster engine cutoff and separation 2.5 minutes into flight. GNC trajectory looks good on the Falcon Heavy. Reports show that the M1D engine performance is nominal.
Impact engine sales begun.
Side boosters have begun to throttle down in preparation for the upcoming shutdown in 20 seconds. Major event coming up with side booster shutdown and separation.
Inside shutdown. Side boosters. Beacon. Center. Boosters activated. Is throttling up. S1 keeps going. Still booster boost box started.
Successful separation. We're coming up on Miko and shutdown.
Stay slow. Separation confirmed. Event recognition. This big burn looks good on side boosters. Backbone startup.
Coming up on fairing separation.
Center core side engines on power, also look good.
Well, they put on a heck of a show, haven't they? And it looks like everything that was supposed to happen did happen. I say looks like. What a, you know, as one who was there, there's the car. Phil Keating, it's the car.
Can we see it? That's amazing. Equipped on that car, little thruster rockets to keep the car
space-time continuum.
Earth's orbit. Yeah. And they also have 3 cameras, which, according to Elon Musk, CEO and founder of SpaceX, will provide some epic views of that car traveling deep into space.
Pretty incredible, you know. There's a lot riding on this for these guys. This is just a test flight, but they've set it up as a huge event. The crowds are insane. I guess they sold out of official viewing seats or spaces in like 24 hours or something.
Yeah, there's about 100,000 people estimated to be lining up the beaches of Florida's Space Coast today. They all got started early with their picnic chairs and their coolers full of beverages and waters to get ready to watch this spectacle. And the 1:30 planned launch, of course, was delayed because of upper-level wind shear. But with just 15 minutes left in today's launch window, that was just absolutely spectacular, and based on everything we've seen so far, it appears this demonstration flight is an absolute success, and we're hoping Elon Musk is going to provide some sort of post-launch statement here. Let's see, where are we? We're
Hey,
about
Phil,
4 minutes away now.
Go ahead, sorry.
We're about 4 minutes away from those two outer rocket boosters. They're falling down now, and at some point we'll be able to see the glow of their engines as they then blast a reverse thrust and go landing over the Air Force Station at the landing zones. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the center core will continue out towards the Atlantic to try to land on the drone ship. Never before in the history of space travel have 3 rockets blasted off from a launch pad, delivering the payload what appears to be flawlessly, and then landing all 3 rockets back on land to then be recycled and reused for future launches. Still to come for SpaceX is their BFR, big rocket, that will have a huge spacecraft to take space tourists. Yeah, and a large rocket. And the plan for that is to go, oh, we can see the 2 booster rockets coming down right now.
Can your camera see it?
It's going to make it. It's going to be 2 sonic booms to really thrill the crowds that have gathered. You can hear the crowd and electricity in Hawthorne at SpaceX headquarters. They are still going nuts like they're at the Super Bowl. This is a big deal for that company. It's a big deal for other space companies. This is proving this can be done. The fuel on board, kerosene and liquid oxygen, and it was loud, it was thunderous, and as the rocket rose up above Earth in Cape Canaveral, just the percussion in the air was like 7 drummers just it was just incredible. And so those 2 rocket boosters are descending right now, and that will be another double sonic boom spectacle for what is a multiple event demonstration flight launch today, Shep.
Hey, we're kind of watching the thing. Can you see the screen, Phil?
I can, yeah.
I guess the idea here is everything is reusable, and if this works, everything's going to be a heck ton cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the Elon Musk model for SpaceX is reusability, driving down the cost of launches, ultimately getting these Falcon rockets to blast off and deliver payloads like satellites and U.S. military payloads on a very rapid turnaround basis.
Just pot it up and listen. No mics open. Just stay with it. Stay with it.
And the Falcons have landed.
LZ1, LZ2, both side boosters have touchdown. Landing all 3, moving on to 1 by 1, recovery 1 and recovery 2.
Coming up very shortly, the Center Core will be attempting its landing on the autonomous spaceport drone ship.
The core landing is next. So you saw those 2 rockets. Fill the core now. Let's listen to the SpaceX people.
Operations may get loose signal. We're crossing our fingers that's not the case right now.
Stage 2, nominal parking orbit insertion.
So it looks like that landing is happening at the moment. We have lost signal. We're hoping that signal comes back shortly.
Well, look at this. SpaceX has some anchor people. Phil, I think they're trying to take our job. Is it a signal loss, Phil, or is there a problem?
There's a signal issue. The drone ship is so far out east of Florida over the horizon, the curvature of the Earth sometimes makes that signal hard to reach Earth, and that's what they're trying to work on right now. But the first 2, wow, those sonic booms, just explosively loud here where we're standing.
I remember being there for shuttle launch after shuttle launch, working in that local market there, and that feeling is nothing you'll ever forget. Compared to that, Phil, what was this?
Very similar to the shuttle launches we covered, the last ones being in 2011, Atlantis being the final shuttle flight. And the crowds today, not only here at the Kennedy Space Center campus and over at the visitor center viewing spots, but all up and down the beaches. You couldn't get a hotel if you hadn't had a reservation prior to yesterday, and just the lines of cars getting in here today, just massive interest, the biggest crowd since 2011 without a doubt. And there was really a sense, Blue Origin has now set up a rocket manufacturing facility over on Space Commerce Way. A lot of the